Welcome again, friends, beautiful ones, to Spirit Speaks. We're here again with Sister Sameen Affaf. And I do want to say that I could say, met her uh, in some very interesting virtual discourse on Instagram about communal care as opposed to self-care. And one of the most important, I think, spiritual as well as political places that people can get involved is to get connected to the Red Nation movement. And I was already following the Red Nation, and they posted Sameen's post about communal care in the midst of one of the most difficult periods of the virus time that we're living through. And so I noticed this amazing set of contributions that Sameen made. And thanks to being able to communicate in this way, we do look forward to the day when Instagram is turned into a public resource and is not owned by the beast in Silicon Valley, but is owned by the people who use it. But Sameen and I were able to connect in this way. And the whole question of how self-care has become a kind of ideology that is propagated by capitalism to isolate and individualize people instead of, and really does violence to their spiritual nature, which is again this connectedness, and that once one's soul work is done, our soul isn't limited to our own person, and our own health isn't limited to our own single space or body. So if you could say something more about your understanding of what communal care means as a spiritual practice, as opposed to self-care, and how you understand how self-care has been distorted. Those are two separate things that are obviously related.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Jim. Oh my goodness. And I think what you said about, this having come up, especially during the time of this pandemic that we have all been going through, that was very much on my mind. And I know that this time has given us a lot of space for reflection, but that sort of idea of self-care seemed to pop up even more during this time that we're all going through.
Right.
And it's interesting, like when we think of this idea of self-care, it's a response to what, right? We have a growing anxiety that all of us seem to be dealing with. There's this uncertainty, there's this idea of a lack of control, at a very day-to-day level, just, fulfilling our needs, our material needs has become extremely difficult for a lot of families and a lot of people. And so, dealing with all of this stress that, we're going through physically and spiritually and emotionally in many, many ways, this idea of self-care has sort of been propagated as, yes, take some time to do something for yourself, right? It's okay to, be selfish and take some time to journal these things, put on a face mask, right? Because a face mask will solve all your problems. And so, there's a disconnect there that just didn't sit right with me, right? There's nothing wrong with doing these things for yourself, in order to feel good and have caring for your body, caring for your mind, that's great. But the idea that self-care would be sold to us quite literally as the medicine for being in these systems of oppression, right? The disconnect between our personal experience and these broad frameworks is something that we just don't make, right? And within a capitalist system, of course, it wouldn't be made, because I truly believe, living in this capitalist society, in this system that profits off of our exploitation, that is the cause of this stress. You know, white supremacy, sexism, dealing with all these different forces of violence on the day-to-day is what is causing that weathering of the soul and that weathering of the body. And so to not see that as the source of that pain and that stress, and then to sort of sell us like, okay, you know, you just have to do this by yourself. It's selling individualism for the problem of unchecked individualism, which has caused so much of this pain and so much of the suffering to begin with. And so for me, that disconnection was something that really I had to reflect on and think about and think, okay, so if dealing with this stress individually is really just a form of self-preservation on the day-to-day, it doesn't really address the actual source of the harm, then what will be that solution for us? Where do we find our healing? And for me, of course, as someone who really believes in the dismantling, I don't even want to use the word dismantling, the complete, you know, removal of these systems and replacing them with something better. To me, that only happens in community. And so that's where that idea of communal care comes in.
Well, I think that in many ways, what is arising in the face of what people are experiencing are multiple things. I mean, I think the way the system operates, this isn't even really, you know, some tiny cabal of, you know, sinister controllers. It's just the way the system reproduces itself because of how
Yes.
the power relations affect culture and the way that people live. And so there are going to arise these tendencies to turn something like self-care, you know, being good to your own body and mind is worth doing. But turning this into a product that is then sold by entrepreneurs who are interested in profiting, I mean, I do have to say, there is a yoga teacher I follow who was born in South Asia, and she has some wonderful information. I have bought one of her books that is a wonderful resource, but all of her followers are upper middle class. As far as I can tell from watching what I see online, upper middle class, well educated, European descended people. Now she lives in Minnesota and did do some posting last summer about, you know, the whole George Floyd reality. But she makes some real good money selling what she knows. Now, there's nothing wrong with her making a living out of the knowledge she has that does help people. But the fact that this is turned into a commodity becomes sort of a high level product that cool white people consume. Just looking at it, it's obviously there's something wrong with this. Just observing what is happening there. And the fact that your post was picked up by a very, you know, serious revolutionary transformative movement, the Red Nation movement, and that real care entails what is arising, I think, in another way, which is that people are learning how to take care of each other when the structures aren't working. And there are things emerging that aren't necessarily highly institutionalized or heavily funded, but there's lots of mutual aid networks appearing. And people are becoming much more aware that we have to do for each other, and that reliance on state or corporate power is not going to solve even our inner problems, much less structural ones. So yes,
Yes.
people need money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, given the system we're in, people have to have money. But to turn
Yes.
something that's meant to heal and care into a product that is only available, you know, as a sale item in a kind of spiritual or psychological shopping center, this is a serious problem, which has to be, I think, lived out in a different way. And you're naming it as communal care. How would communal care work in your sense, as opposed to, you know, the $100 an hour visit to the therapist to help you cope, which is what a lot of people who are, you know,
Right.
coping do.
Yes. No, absolutely. And of course, there's nothing to undermine that effort. Somebody who has the ability to access, I mean, it's not available to anyone, right? And I think that idea of privilege, who has the access to these avenues of health, of self-care that we have been relying on, right? And so it's certainly not the most marginalized communities who need it the most, right?
Right.
And so in your example, actually, of the yoga teacher, I don't see, of course, I would wish in a non-capitalist system that we, weren't there wasn't this idea of selling, our spirituality for, our well-being, our ability to just make it in the system. Of course, like you said, we all need money to survive. There is something, though, that's interesting about selling it to an audience that is mostly affluent, white, who, what is the intention of what they're doing with that spiritual practice? Is it an actual connection to something that is meaningful and healing, and that will sort of have a ripple effect on the rest of the community? Or is it, like we've talked about before, something that's done for the self and contained in the self? So that sort of came up. But the idea of community care, as I see it, just getting back directly to your question, is this notion of, I really do believe we have the seeds of healing in us.
Mm-hmm.
And for one another. I believe that makes space for that medicine to enter. And I believe that happens it could be something as simple as holding space for someone, so that they can share their story, share what they're experiencing, in, a space of non-judgment, in a space of, healing and restorative justice. The idea of mutual aid is so important. Like you said, we can't rely on these systems that are not serving us to do so. So where does that leave us? We have the ability to help each other and fulfill one another's needs. So especially with the technology we have, how quickly it is to share funds if we need to share funds with one another. How do we make sure that we are in right relationship with one another? So even if someone has educated us about something, sharing $5 online is a way of saying, I'm grateful for what you have shared with me. So money doesn't have to be the evil, right?
No, it's just a means of exchange.
It's more so this idea of me. Exactly. But there has to be that exchange. And that's where we've fallen short in the system, is that there isn't this mutual benefit that has been maintained. This lack of balance that we have, of course, is hurting so many of us. So that idea of mutual aid, of being there, food sharing, having, like, taking care of people's needs at a very basic level, right? You can't tell a single mother who's struggling that, go journal for an hour and, take some time to do that. Maybe, like, let me take care of your child and offer you childcare for an hour. You know, there's certain ways that we can approach care for one another that really, really makes meaningful impact. And I've really been thinking about how within this individualized system that we've all, like you said, it's self-reinforcing. You know, we swim in this culture of individualism, and to keep replicating it. But unfortunately, that has the effect of our solutions have also been very individual, right? So even if it's something like sharing funds, you know, somebody will think to themselves, okay, here's somebody that's in need of money, let's say to meet their rent this week. Oh, but you know, like, I don't have much to share. So that it's almost as if it's like, because I can't share what I think is a substantial amount, you know, like maybe I can't afford the $20 or the $50 to help this person, but we don't even recognize that sharing that $1, if, you know, multiplied by the power of community, can help to support that one person's needs. It's sort of that idea still of, as an individual, what am I doing, rather than how am I part of the whole that can help contribute in a more powerful way.
I think,
I hope that makes sense. But
yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that's coming out of this period of, I mean, I think the whole virus time is a spiritual event of massive proportions. And
yes,
Sister Arundhati Roy wrote an essay towards the beginning of the time, "The Pandemic is a Portal." And
right.
this is worth reading because she really has a sense that this is a doorway into another way of being for everyone. But they're really, you know, there's serious obstacles to getting to where everyone knows we need to get to, which is a life of sharing and communion, and not isolation and domination and all the cruelties that go with the current situation. So I think one of the things, though, that is arising, and I've just noticed it from people I know directly and things that we see thanks to the miracle of the screens on our phones and our devices. People really are aware,
Yes,
and are living out more, much more, their connectedness to each other. And I think
yes,
the transformation of the economy and the way that people make their living towards more collective things is also
yeah,
more available, and people are becoming more aware that this is what we really need to do. And so I think
yeah,
the spiritual possibilities of really cultivating all the connections we have of various kinds for continuous support and growth. And when we do individual spiritual work, that we make it part of the intention that, you know, I'm not just praying for my own enlightenment, but that I hold in myself, before the vastness of what is beyond myself, all these other people and beings and situations. And
yeah,
there is a tradition of this called intercessory prayer, which is something that I've been led to over a number of years. And I think this is really important
right.
for everybody's development, is that we always keep cultivating our communal nature, which is that who we are
Yes,
really isn't just the me-ness, but it is that we have these ways that we can be with other people in meaningful and, you know, substantial, real life together. And I think this could
Yes.
be what we're living through is an opportunity to really become who we're meant to be, which is uh, communally connected, creative collaborators for a new way of being human beings on the earth. And I think what you suggested is
I
why, you know, why revolutionaries have been drawn to what you've said, to your fellow revolutionary contribution, is that caring doesn't need to be a professionalized commodity that only experts can dispense. Although someone who is an expert
absolutely.
can be of assistance to people, but that there are ways for us to care for each other and to assist groups of people to do uh, caring, and that we really do, you know, make it through life because of other people being with us and other souls being connected to ours,
Absolutely.
and that this is this is part of a very serious spiritual practice, or very, it's essential to be with. And as much as our each soul has its own path, uh, the path entails all these bonds and interconnections with all the other spiritual energies that exist, and to be aware of how important that
Yes.
is and to nurture this is really essential. And part of my experience of being cared for is just meeting people like you who, you know, are part of how we're all doing what we're doing and being who we are.
Yes. No, absolutely. And that notion of this being a portal, I believe in that so strongly. And the idea that pain is a portal, you know,
Mm.
our our growing pains as a spiritual entity and as part of spirit is a portal, right? And that portal is hopefully leading us in communion with one another, communion with all living things, right? And um, you know, that notion that you just mentioned of the expert, we need to dissolve that idea of the expert. I believe that that really is also a function
Mhm.
of white supremacy as well. This
Absolutely.
notion of especially as an educator, and you know this as well, you know, the idea of you being the jug that pours into the glasses, which are your students, is completely false, right? Everyone enters the space as a teacher. Everyone enters the space with this experiential knowledge and wisdom of what they have to share. And so we are all capable to enter that space and heal one another and offer something to one another. And I think that, especially in this idea of communal care, the notion that everybody has something to offer is so important. So it's not this idea of, you know, I have this capacity to give, I am this savior. That also has to be completely erased from the equation. It's more so we all have something.
Mhm.
Again, it's mutual aid, right?
Right.
It's this restoring of the balance of all have something to contribute and give. Um, and so I think you so eloquently put that, and it's very important that we realize that. But yes, I think that this idea of our spiritual journey being something that's contained in the self, whatever our spiritual practices are, if to be in communion with one another. If your meditation doesn't lead you to connection, then what purpose does it serve?
Well, we wish a blessing on all those who are listening, and I'm so thankful for your contributions to our ongoing work together. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Sameen, I'm going to do a cool thing that Zoom allows us to do. May I put your I'm going to put your Instagram on here. See if I can do it right.
Sure.
Okay. So that's,
I love
if you want to connect with Sameen and see her beautiful posts that we are the liberation process. And it is what we do personally actually has cosmic effects and vice versa. Cosmic things affect us, and communal realities we carry around, and we are in existence as soul connected beings. Please, anyone who wants to contact her who views this video, that's her Instagram profile, and a good way to find out what she's thinking and doing and what she's connected to. Thanks to everybody for
I love
listening
that.
to this post. And there are going to be more opportunities for Spirit to speak, but we can certainly say that Spirit speaks through Sameen Affaf.